of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to be excused. I've got family in the hospital. Thank you.
All right, take care. Has everybody had a chance to look at September 8th regular session minutes?
Yes.
And September 8th budget adoption hearing minutes? Any corrections? Approved as read. And September 22nd joint special meeting minutes? They're all be approved. Treasurer's report for September. None, yes. Clerk's report for July. All right. Department reports. Sheriff.
I'll give you a copy of our financials that we brought in for the month of September. The jail count for today is 105 and work release is 16.
All the departments that are good.
Diane's over there in the door.
Oh, didn't see it.
I couldn't hear you, I'm sorry. Are you ready for a report?
Yeah.
Okay. How about that? I was standing back in the corner right there. Full in here today. So, as you can tell, we've been super busy with positive cases. Anybody else do that?
The rest, Bill had to leave and Derek and Jeremy are on the Zoom, I guess.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions related to the numbers on the clinic and or anything like that?
So I guess like on some of it, we've been reading, you know, like Vandenberg and all that, they're red. And they're really tightening things up. I mean,
We're, Vandenberg is actually orange.
orange.
And we are orange. They grade, or the state gives us a numerical grade related to like our number of positive tests per 100.
Okay.
And it has to do with population. There's several factors in there, which I can send you how they come up with that. But we are at 2.5. And the last time I spoke with them, which was Friday, they were saying that our rate was 12.8. But that could have changed by now because I haven't looked at it this morning. Actually, the site was down this morning, so I couldn't get on it. So, but just to kind of fill you in a little bit, since we started having the COVID cases back in March, there were 624 positive cases. We had 256 of those in September. 113 as of last week when I ran this report were still active, and we're probably way over that because we had large numbers last week also. We've had 10 deaths. Some of those maybe were in nursing homes until their actual address was, you know, where they live was out of the county, but they're kind of linked together with us.
So on that there, if you're a patient in a nursing home in Gibson County, but you reside, your home address was say Pike County.
Yes, they would count as Pike County's number
Even though they passed away in our
in Gibson County. So that's where numbers get a little conflicting
And that's why
sometimes.
they changed sometimes.
Yeah, on the dashboard. Mhm. That's exactly what happens. In August, we had 120 cases, and in July, 154. And those were our biggest numbers up until September. And as you can tell, that's been kind of crazy. We have had well over 100 cases so far this month. Like I said, the site was down this morning that I get all my data from the state, and so I wasn't able to get accurate numbers. So I just know some of the numbers that we had last week on top of the 50 that was already there. We had one day in particular where we broke the record last week, and we had 31 new cases. And we've had always our averaging in the high teens pretty much, or jumping into the 20s, which is the most positive cases we've had in a day since this all started for Gibson County. We're working very closely with the school superintendents. The schools are doing a great job. Some of them went hybrid, some of them went virtual. They're doing whatever they can to keep the kids 6 feet apart. There is some problems with sporting activities, you know, because the kids, when they're on their team, and there's certain sports that it's just almost impossible to not be in close contact if you're involved with that sport. So we're seeing some of that, which it's involving a lot of contact tracing with that. So obviously that's keeping us super, super busy. We are still working on, as a matter of fact, I'm supposed to interview some people today to start doing our testing site at the fairground. However, the state is having some problems with that on the sites that are up, and they haven't released any more funding until they get those kinks worked out, which I'm kind of glad we wasn't in the first phase if they're having problems. But we still should be moving forward with running that testing site. Our goal time is to start doing the testing site. The health department would take over the testing site November the 1st. However, again, depending on the funding and when they can get all these kinks worked out with the lab and the scheduling system, then that's when we will go forward. As of now, Optum is still running the testing site out at the fairgrounds, and it is Monday through Friday, 8 to 8. Okay, and so I know that you all, do you want me to go ahead and do about the overtime, or do you want to wait?
I think we're,
I'm sorry, I'll do that second.
yeah, you're like on the,
It's in there?
yeah,
You want me to wait on that one?
yeah.
Okay. Do you have any questions about anything else?
So the site is still open at the fairgrounds?
Yes.
And it's still being run by the same group that's been doing it since May or June, whatever that was.
And that site is free, and it will stay free when we take it over. We will not collect insurance information. It is provided for by a grant, and so there will be no cost to individuals.
Are all the sites free? 'Cause
No. I am getting a lot of reports that Deaconess clients are getting bills. So I'm not, associated with the Deaconess billing, so I'm not sure what's going on. I'm just getting complaints from residents that they're getting bills from Deaconess.
So on,
It is going through your insurance,
Yeah,
or at least ours did.
yeah. And I think it's probably when there's a glitch in the insurance. And some of them, I've had different ones say that their insurance paid a certain amount and then they have to pay the rest. So,
It's paying 100%.
yeah,
so if I went out there to be tested, they would turn around and bill the insurance?
Optum would not, Deaconess would.
Deaconess would bill your insurance and at
But
this
if I go
point,
to the
our-
Optimum site, then there's not.
Right.
there's not-
And you don't get your test results for,
48 hours.
oh, it's longer than that.
No.
Yes.
I went 3 times and mine's been back in 48 hours, so. I don't know if you went recently. Have you been recently?
I know somebody that went last week and didn't get it back in 48 hours.
Okay, because that's, I go frequently to get tested and I get mine in 48 hours. I know I get complaints from people, so I go out and get tested and I always have mine in 48 hours, so
I
I'm not
haven't
sure.
been tested and I don't want to.
So, I'm not real sure what's going on with that because I thought, oh, this,
You wear your badge when you go in?
no,
I thought maybe you guys know.
no, that I have special privileges. No, I do not. One of the things with the flu vaccine, for the next 2 weeks, we will not be scheduling more appointments due to, we've had a big response to that this year. And I have to see how our inventory is gonna hold up, and then after this 2-week section, we'll see where we're at if I can order any more vaccine. As of right now, certain vaccines flu vaccines I'm not able to order again. And so I just don't wanna schedule appointments and then not be able to have the supply for them. So the next 2 weeks, we will not be scheduling flu vaccines. We have some already scheduled, but we will not be scheduling them. But we will in 2 weeks again, so. Okay,
Thank you.
no problem.
If you just want to stay there, we can
Okay.
go on to old business. I'll move you up one there for the weekend overtime. Do you have a plan?
Well, Judy had gotten together, she called several places, related to that, and it's pretty much all over the place as to how, overtime is paid. But it's really not even just weekend overtime, because when we're getting, 30 cases a day, if we are letting the state do the initial investigation, but we are contacting people because they're frequently confused on when their quarantine dates are, or they just have other questions. So sometimes when we get on the phone with them, we're on there for 30 minutes or more. And obviously that takes up, when you have 30 a day, that takes up a lot of time. Besides, we have all the other stuff we're supposed to be doing. So overtime is something that we're probably just going to be looking at if this goes on. I understand that I'm not eligible for overtime. However, I don't feel comfortable having Dana work overtime and not be, paid for that. So I guess, some of them were comp time, they issued them comp time, some of them said you could have up to 4 hours, and then that was taken away because COVID was taking so much of the nurses' time. There was all over the place, like Vanderbilt County has like 30 nurses, so they spread it out with their nurses more. We have 2, and Posey County has hired another nurse, so because their numbers are getting high like ours, so it really, my thought is we would just pay her time and a half for anything over her scheduled time. But if you want us to work in the office so that we're paid time and a half, we can do that and stay in the office. I'm there most nights till 6 anyhow, so. I just feel like we need to do something to compensate my nurse, because she's gonna have to work over 40 hours. However, with dealing with this, I did look into, we recently had a staff member that passed away that worked as our part-time person. And so I have that funding in my budget, but I need somebody with medical experience right now. I don't need just a clerical person, and not that they don't have a whole set of skills on their own. I'm just saying I need somebody with some medical experience. So whenever I was talking to some of the other counties, some of them have hired like a part-time CMA, which would be able to help with some of the nursing stuff. However, then it could cover the clerical also. But I'm probably looking, I need to have like a $15 an hour pay for something like that, like what we're paying at the courthouse or at the testing site. I cannot get anybody qualified. I know when I talk to different ones, they won't even consider it at $10 an hour with no benefits. And so if we had that person come in and fill that CMA part-time position, then that's gonna lessen our overtime, because we'd have 3 people that can make phone calls. So that may be an option that we can do. And obviously, I will oversee if there's any overtime. When we get in really bad situations, if this continues on and on, we've absorbed a lot of that overtime. I've just given Dana time off, or I did most of it myself. But, we're 7 months into it now, and I don't see it ending, So we need to have another plan as to get us some help, medical help. Jim Allen did volunteer. He's going to work with us if we get immunizations, and maybe we can, they can help us with giving immunizations for the COVID whenever it becomes available. So that would be very helpful, and I really appreciate him volunteering that. So are you comfortable, or do you have to make a motion if I could hire my part-time person as more like a certified medical assistant for $15 an hour?
The salary ordinance would have to be changed.
The salary ordinance at this point says part-time nurse is paid $17 per hour. I do think if she's gonna do a CMA or whatever, we do need to set, or at least add that wording. So, because that's an exception to our salary ordinance.
Is that reimbursable through COVID?
We can, as long as we can turn, like Dana's overtime, we're gonna turn through the CARES Act up till now, but I don't know how long that's, is that gonna continue on as long as we need it? However, the CMA, my thought is I only have one person that can do billing in my office, and we're getting so many people with private insurance that when we're having a clinic of any kind, it's hard, if that person's out, it's hard for the rest of us to fill in. So I would really like the CMA to learn the billing process also. So they would be a backup to the vital records, the billing, and us. Is my goal with that. But I need somebody with a skill set, and then we can build on it.
Will that be reimbursed though, even though she's doing other jobs or not?
Through the CARES Act,
Yeah.
not if it's through my part-time position. And I don't know how long that CARES money, I mean, it's there now, but I don't know how long it's gonna continue to be there. If after the first of the year, it goes away, I'm gonna need help for a while. And like I said, I have the $10 an hour in the budget. And I can pull some money probably from other parts of my budget if I have to make that $15 an hour.
Is CMA able to give vaccinations?
Yes,
Because hopefully they come up with something
right,
soon.
yeah. But that's kind of what my proposal was, is to fill that position. It'll lessen the overtime that we have to do. And we could even have that person maybe even work till 6 if we need evening hours, you know what I mean? So that they maybe work 10 to 6 instead of 8 to 4 to answer the evening questions. That's what we're running into a lot, is that we can't catch people until the evenings.
I think last month, whenever she was in, it was like she wanted us to tell her that this is how it's gonna be, and we're not comfortable telling.
No, that's okay.
Because we didn't understand, how
Yeah,
process and all that.
yeah,
I think as a group, we do not want comp time, that we do want to pay, if it's overtime. I think I'm speaking
Yeah.
for the majority. I think we have to be included in the salary ordinance, most definitely. The title and the dollar amount. It's a part-time position, so there's a limit on the number of hours.
Yeah, that would be 40 hours a week.
Can't be 40 hours.
no,
a week.
the lady that we had that did it before worked 23. So would that still be okay? Because she worked 8 to 4, and then she worked 8 to 3.
You mean a part-timer that,
Mhm.
well, she was just clerical.
Right, yeah.
Yeah,
So
should be fine.
to do that same hours, that's what I was thinking I would do. One day, 7 hours, and the other 2, 8.
Why,
So it's kind of filling a position, but I want to upgrade the skill set in that position. And like I said, I think that will lessen some of this overtime, so it's kind of gonna even itself out. But it's hard to get someone with the skill set I need under $15 an hour.
Derek or Jeremy, you got any questions? Thoughts?
I don't have any problem with the CMA pay, being increased. I think it's reasonable, especially with the CARES money.
Yeah, I'll just echo that sentiment as well.
I guess I'd be willing to make a motion that within the salary ordinance, we include the wording of a part-time
MA,
did you speak NA?
there is both.
There's both, okay. It's M as in Mary Peg, at a rate, part-time at a rate of $15 an hour while this pandemic is in progress.
I'll second. Have a motion, second, any other discussion, questions?
No.
And then just to clarify, I mean, again, I will keep watch over how much overtime there is. But if someone works overtime other than myself, it would be time and a half,
Well,
correct?
I thought you were talking about Dana.
What, right, but, I mean, if we do immunizations, as with H1N1, we all worked, because you're gonna have to have clerical people as well, if you can recall, and we did overtime during that time frame also. We all got overtime. However, there should be grants associated with that when they do it, but they're saying when they're doing immunizations that we are not going to get funding for it. So I just want to have a heads up that if we do gear up for immunizations for COVID, then I need my whole staff on site, because you're gonna need somebody as crowd control, you're gonna need 2 or 3 people doing the paperwork, even if it's just filling out the forms to make sure they're correct. And then how we did it with H1N1 is that person that filled out, made sure the form was filled out correctly, the questions, if there was anything that was out of the normal, then they brought that attention to us nurses, so that basically when we was there, all we had to do was give the immunizations, and then they would have it red check on it if we needed to answer further questions. So they kind of did the screening process for us. And that's how we did it with H1N1. So I figure we'll probably set up, when we start doing COVID immunizations, which, maybe next spring, but that's, we have to start planning for some of that too. The state is asking for us to have a plan. My plan is that we would use the fairgrounds. We already have the testing site set up. We've got things lined up to rent that building. And so we will be doing as many as we can, the immunization clinics out there, because it's set up a lot better to do crowd control. So we don't have people that would be within the 6 feet, We'd have a lot more room to spread it out, and there's a better flow for traffic out there. So that's my plans with that. So I don't want you to think this is gonna go away at the beginning of the year. I want you to be realistic and say, this is probably gonna go on at least a year. And if we do immunizations, there will be after hours, which we can have some people come in late to offset that, but there's gonna be some overtime, as we had in the past. I know personally, when we did H1N1, I worked usually from 5 in the morning till 7, several nights, because I come in at 5 to get everything ready for the school clinics, be at the school by 7, and then we did after hours clinics at the office. So it's a lot of work. But it should be short-lived whenever that hits, because, Gibson County has 30,000, plus or minus residents that may come. And so we would give 500 to 700 a night is when we was doing that. So it's not a long period that would go on. And hopefully that would end a lot of the contact tracing and stuff also.
So whenever this does start to take place as far as these vaccinations and all that, is it just limited, you have to be a county resident, you can't cross a county line to go to a site for it?
It probably will not be that way because the state is buying the vaccine and the federal government is, I would
So
say,
you'd have to provide proof of residency, you think?
I doubt that we would go that route. We
But I'm
did
just
not,
saying, you know,
Yeah.
would we be vaccinating, other counties?
yeah. And with Toyota, a lot of their workers are out of county and we may be vaccinating them. And that's an additional thousands of people if we end up and work with them and do theirs.
Right.
But their staff would probably work with us and so. And I am also looking into purchasing a trailer through the CARES funding that we can do immunizations out of. We had a trailer that's probably what was bought in 2009, but it is not set up to do really immunizations out of. It has a generator, but it is one of those big old drag around loud generators. And there's no place to wash your hands in it. It just really would not be acceptable to do immunizations out of. So the CARES funding, and Terry Hedges had told me there's funding in there for us to get a trailer. And now that we have the truck, we can hook up the truck and the trailer and like go to these businesses if they want us to go on site and do vaccines. So
I think it's
I'm good. I'm ready to vote.
Get a motion and a second on the floor.
Okay. Vote, handle this here. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, and then overtime is.
I'll watch it. I mean, I will keep an eye on it. I know I have to stay within my budget as best I can. I'm just saying that there's probably gonna be expenses that I can't control because of this situation.
I think you just have to, you know, stay on top of it and report back to us.
I will.
You know, we, or at least, I think the majority of us, or all of us understand that there's gonna be overtime. It's just that we need to monitor,
I understand that.
you know, just report back to us on a monthly basis, and we'll see what's going on, and maybe such a matter that, you know, the CARES funding continues to cover that. And
Yeah,
It's
then
it's not an impact to us. on our
Right.
budgets.
I just don't want to have 100% counting on that whenever we're gonna be moving forward.
Sure.
So, okay, well, thank you guys. Have a great day.
You too.
Okay. Additional appropriation and reduction resolution for public defender has been advertised. Motion to approve. Do we have to do that in two separate or all?
No, it's all together.
Okay. Got a motion. Have a second.
Okay.
Dan, second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Council to appoint, Board of Zoning member. We've got some people that have been spoke to. We're gonna table that until next month. And so we can get, there's some people that been spoke to, but not said 100% if they're interested or not. So.
I think they're interested, they just said that they hadn't received complete confirmation that they would accept. So, you know, it's, I think Jeremy has spoke with an individual, Mike, and the individual is very interested. I
He
spoke-
serves on the Princeton area planning commission. We spoke with the county attorney and didn't see there was a problem on that. And, so he's willing to
if you want
serve.
to.
We want to appoint him, so.
Okay. And then, like I said, I had an individual that would accept it and all that. It's just that the individual, you know, he's in an area where there was already representation, so it might be better, in my opinion, to look outside of that and all that, so.
How I feel about it, is you got someone here ready to accept, why we table it, why we wait, kicking it down the road? Is there, what's the purpose of kicking it down
I
the road?
apologize, Mike. I didn't hear whom you recommended.
Jason Brooks from Princeton,
She lives in town though.
he lives in Princeton.
I thought they couldn't live within the incorporated part of it.
As my understanding, you can't live inside an incorporated area.
Is that correct? Oh, okay, well, that wasn't told, I
Yeah.
wasn't aware of that. Okay, so I scratched that. Nobody told me that.
Yeah.
I apologize.
I have someone that I spoke with in person last week who said he was interested, and I've been texting back and forth with him. I called him this morning, and apparently I don't have his accurate number, so I'm hopeful that I'll be able to get with him quickly here, and we'll have that appointment ready in November.
Okay. I'm fine with that.
Salary schedule amendment.
So Peterborough Board.
Under the commissioners, I sent it all to you, it's
Yeah.
under the commissioners, and we're raising it from 75 to 90. I think it was done, it just wasn't put in the salary schedule. It's under board of review
This is for 2020.
for 2020 and going forward, but yeah.
Yeah.
This is this year's.
Kim's back there if you want to talk to her about it.
Kim? Kim Beadle? You're out there?
So do you think that was something that,
I'm being told that they had discussed it and we have paid it. I think it's just something that we didn't change on the salary score schedule.
a year ago?
Uh-huh.
So the Peterborough going from 75 to 90, that was approved back in 2019 for 2020, I guess?
Yes, I believe so, because it goes to the commissioner's budget.
The
Commissioner
commissioners.
first that.
Okay. Is that kind of standard with what others do? I'm just asking, I don't know anything about
To be
it.
honest, I don't know, I mean, they have not had a raise in the whole time I've been assessor, prior to that even. And it's kind of hard to find someone to come in for that
Sure.
amount of money
So what that consists of per meeting or
per day,
per day?
which they only meet like once or twice a year.
Okay. Make a motion, we make that adjustment.
Second.
Motion second. Any other questions? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Twenty 21 salary schedule. This matches up with the budget, right? Entertain a motion to approve the 2021 salary schedule.
So moved.
A motion
Second.
and a second. Any questions or comments? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 And just let department heads and everyone know that there is no raises for next year. No part-time, no overtime in certain departments. emergency departments are, still have it, but all other departments that do not.
We have the standard wording also that, before any position is filled, that it must come before the council, which has been the practice for the last several years anyways, but, just in general, just trying to make sure that we examine all areas that we might be able to save some money, control some costs, and make it through this financial situation.
Craig, does that include myself and Jim also, since we're,
Well, you still come before us anyways, as far as replacement.
when we have a vacancy, don't you just letting us go ahead and fill them because of the situation?
Yeah.
Contact the auditor when she lets them know.
Yeah, I think that clause is still in there.
Still the same. It's
For
still the
you
same.
and for
Nothing's
Jim.
changed. It's just restating what's been in there as far as making sure we're notified before position is refilled, I guess. There was no change in that wording.
No.
It's been that way for several years now.
And that's been in there.
Yeah, and it's just restating that.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been doing it anyways, I'm sure.
Mr. McDonald?
Yes, we're in many different hats today. First on the agenda is the prosecutor's office. Prosecutor Mike Cochran's out of town today, so he asked me to come here and asked that he be allowed to fill a part-time receptionist position that has been vacated as of September 24th. It's a position pays $10 an hour and no more than a 20-hour work week. The person leaving didn't have any benefits or anything like that, so just purely a part-time receptionist for the child support, child support office downstairs. I just need the authority to go ahead and advertise.
Was that one that was cut out of?
Wendy, is that budgeted? Or
It
is it
is,
out?
but it's actually in county general.
Okay.
Yes, it is budgeted under the 1,050. Let's see. Yeah, and it was cut out for next year. Yep, cut out for next year.
It was cut out for 2021, right?
Yep.
Part-time one. So I think it would be best that the prosecutor come in next month. Plead the case as far as what's, it's absolutely necessary, but yeah, that was one of the items that we looked throughout all budgets.
So was he aware of that?
He got a
Evidently
copy.
not, because he wouldn't have sent me.
He got a copy of his budget.
So you're just the messenger.
Everyone got a copy of their budget as far as I know.
Okay.
You're still up, so.
I'm still up. Okay, good.
Round two.
What's next?
Elliott, Solar Farm, tax abatement. It's okay, comfortable, you're up again after this one.
Yeah, so, as you know, we had a public hearing in the Gibson Circuit Court, a couple of weeks ago, I believe. Mary Spotted is here, Rick Reed is the local representative. I'm sorry.
Kimberly Ross with Tenacity.
With Tenacity, they're here today to make a presentation on, we re-advertised and resubmitted a resolution. It's been amended to incorporate additional acreage. It does not increase, I guess I'll say this, it does not increase the value on the SB1. It only adds. So your SB1s are what's been filed by and that's their capital dividend on the solar farm. And so They're here to establish a revitalization area with me today. It's been advertised, and so that additional acreage is in there. So I know, a couple weeks ago, we did, I think, in a meeting, approve a revitalization area. Since it has expanded, we had to re-advertise and come back and do the same thing again, just a larger footprint.
Okay.
I'll turn it over to Mary.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Hello, good morning. Thank you for having us. My name is Mary Soliday, and I'm based out of Indianapolis, and I am the Indiana attorney for what is called the RATS, R-A-T-T-S 2, number 2, solar project. I have met some of you.
Mary, I'm just gonna question the Elliott Solar Project.
And Elliott is down the pike. That's not.
Elliott Solar Project.
Oh, I'm in the wrong place. We're going to Knox County tomorrow, my grandson. Thank you, Kimberly, for what I do with that. Okay, we're here at Elliott Solar. Now, Elliott Solar is in 3 townships. And it would be Center, Barton, and Columbia townships. And as you remember, this tried to be redundant because it's a little confusing. The council on September 8th approved a preliminary tax payment resolution, which all it didn't approve tax payment. It established the economic revitalization area. We had a special meeting then a few weeks later where we brought in folks to try to answer questions. Then that was during the Then we have added about 700 acres to the project. I showed Matt Eckerly from Baker Tilly the map, because one of the things Baker Tilly is going to do, of course, is give you a report about the anticipated revenues from this project. That investment level has not changed. That is $150 million, and this project will be completed no later than the end of 2023. So the reason we need to add the acres is because, as you can imagine, this land all has sort of different site issues, site constraints, right? Whether it's, streams or ponds or elevation issues or things that mean that we need the option to move these panels and other infrastructure somewhere within this acreage. So this is not an attempt to increase the investment, but to allow us flexibility so that we can get this project built in these 3 townships. So we're here today because we would like your consideration of this amended and restated resolution. Now, one of the things I worked out yesterday with Jim and your Indianapolis-based attorney, Zeiss Miller, is that we will actually provide the assessor a list of all parcels, and we will have that to her by next Monday. That's our plan. We have most of them listed, but literally we want the public to be able to see what the parcel numbers are. So we will have that. We will then put an ad in the paper, and our hope is that the council will agree to hear or to conduct a final tax payment hearing on November 10th. And so we're working towards that. We're working with Jim and Zeiss Miller and Matt on what's called an economic development agreement, where there would be certain commitments from us, certain potential payments to the county in addition to property taxes. So all of this is in the works, and so we're here today to try to explain this in the sense that it is slightly confusing, that we are adding land, but we are not necessarily increasing the investment. I mean, it might go up a little bit, but we are certainly standing by that $150 million commitment. And then again, into 2023. So we also, because I think I sort of alluded to this, we have another project here in the county. We're not quite ready to roll that out yet, but that's in a different township that I think is probably next year project. But we hope to see more of you here in Gibson County. So may I answer any questions about this project, Elliott Solar?
I had asked this question in a previous meeting, but and you just repeated it, but the SB1 will not change as a result of expanding this area, and the abatement amount that you're asking for won't automatically increase for anything that's developed in this area, but it'll beyond that $150 million investment, you'd have to come back to ask for an additional abatement on a new project in that area. Is that correct?
That is correct. Now, we don't anticipate, by the way, this map changing anymore, but you're correct. If it were to, let's say we wanted to add another 500 acres, we definitely would have to come back. So the boundaries are as shown on your resolution for you today. You cannot alter those without another round of public meetings and hearings.
So looking at this, it looks like the property was added to the project at the western border and the southeastern
Yeah.
section.
Yes, let me get it. We added land, you're correct, west and south. And this property, by the way, is all south of 64, I believe.
Yeah. It looks like it was added in the Douglas Station area.
Yeah.
And west of Somerville.
West of 69 towards Somerville, yeah.
Looks like there was
East
some,
of 69 and west of Somerville, yes.
looks like on both sides of 69 and
Right.
Somerville, there was some of that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's so interesting about these projects is it's very expensive to get the power to the grid. And so, of course, the goal is to find land nearby a substation that is existing, so that we're not spending millions and millions trying to get it there, because it does affect viability. So my guess is that the development team picked up these west parcels because they're closer to the transmission. Right.
We need a motion to accept this resolution.
Yes.
So we- I'll make that motion. Let's see. What?
I'll second.
Have you got the,
Right one?
I don't know, let me see.
Got the wrong one.
So what the motion would be on the regulatory preliminary amended and restated
The
resolution.
right one?
Yeah, I thought it was, I got the correct one.
Okay.
You got a motion, is that
And
it?
then map attached to that.
Yeah, but, so I've got like 5 copies up here. So we're gonna have them sign just one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just sure, have to sign the one I handed you this morning, because
Yeah.
we changed it yesterday, it was like the parcel.
Okay. So I'm gonna lay yours right there. Okay.
Have
That's
a
the one.
motion and a second. Any other questions or comments or anything? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 I have to abstain, I have property within the.
Did they?
Yeah.
I couldn't tell. He said aye on there.
So just a recap, so November 10th, they will be coming back and asking for consideration on the abatement part of this. Okay,
Okay.
Alright.
so we'd like to, Sherry, like to be placed on the agenda.
I got it.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, appreciate it.
And do you need, I guess I'm asking ahead of time, do you need Baker Tilly here November 10th on that? Because Matt will need to be here and schedule that. Now, that's on the abatement. So if you need the numbers, we need to get Matt on board to be down here November 10th.
And we do have a preliminary analysis based on the information we have now, where, we have a presentation available. Sherry's got hard copies that will evolve as we get some more information from both Kim and the company on the land valuation, but talking about the concepts and impacts of assessed value. It will look kind of familiar to the conversation we had a couple of years ago about Toyota and their abatement requests. So we're happy to provide similar information, or I can even go over the information we have now today, or.
I think it'd be important that they be here.
Be here, can you be here November 10th?
If I can't be here, someone in my shop will be.
So do you want him to go over that information today that he has as far as the impact? Or you want him to wait till November 10th?
It'd probably be good to to do it today, and then that way you can think on it for a period of time, so.
Sure, okay. Thank you.
Will we get copies? Will we get copies?
Yeah, yeah.
Sherry has more copies.
Oh, okay.
As mentioned, my name is Matt Beckerly. I'm a partner with Baker Tilly out of Indianapolis, and I think most of you remember me from being here through the years. We were engaged by the county to prepare a property tax impact analysis for this proposed project, specifically associated with the request for property tax abatement. That's fine. If I had a nickel for every time there was a technological problem with something I'm trying to do in the last 7 months. All right. Let's see. No, it's not clicking for me. Oh. All right, here we go. As Mary mentioned, I'm just going to go through some of the details of the proposed project. As it has been initially presented, $150 million of total investment, and the allocation, preliminary allocation is 75% of the investment in Center Township and 25% in Barton Township. This may evolve, and if it does, we can certainly provide updates as needed. There have been 2 abatement scenarios or options being proposed for consideration. That's what you'll vote on next month. Option 1 would be a 5-year traditional declining property tax abatement, where they would start off in year 1 paying no property taxes on the improvements, and then incrementally pay more and more. I do want to point out that any abatement would not apply to land value. So any change in value due to the change in land use, if it's assessed as ag land now, but then it gets assessed at a higher rate because it's commercial use or some modified use, that cannot be abated. So that will immediately grow the property tax base. The other option being proposed is a 5-year, 100% property tax abatement, where they would pay no taxes on those improvements for the first 5 years and then be taxed at the full amount thereafter. Again, abatement not being applied to land value. There, as Mary mentioned and Jim mentioned, there's a couple of proposals out there in terms of economic development payments that would be made to the county in consideration for the use of this land and taking it out of kind of developable use moving forward, and that would be associated with the different abatement scenarios. That will be discussed more fully in the future. So I don't really think we need to get into that today. What I want to do is run through the illustrated property tax impact of each of these scenarios, starting with the estimated assessed value from the proposed investment. We have this broken out by the utility property, which is what would be abated, the real property improvements. There's a small amount of real property improvements that are associated with this, maintenance, buildings, fencing, things of that nature. And then also the gray represents that increase in land valuation. We use some pretty broad assumptions on the land valuation impact for this analysis. That's being refined in coordination with Kim and with the company. So we'll refine that as more information becomes available. But you do see that over time, and this is the 5-year phase in, you start with about $8.7 million in new assessed value, and as the abatement peels off, getting up to $51.5 million in new assessed value. With utility property, it's treated similarly to traditional personal property, like what Toyota has, in that as it depreciates, it eventually reaches what's called the, you've heard me talk about the 30% depreciation floor before, where it's not taxed at less than 30% of the acquisition cost of the equipment. So you have those same protections in place for utility property. On the company's books, it might be recorded at $0 because it's fully depreciated, but they're still going to be taxed on that 30% of the acquisition cost. So that's important to keep in mind. And there are also going to be some protections built into the economic development agreement that provides some consideration for in the event of the General Assembly perhaps declaring solar generating equipment to be tax exempt, that the county would still receive the benefit as if it were taxable. So that's going to be built into the economic development agreement. That's a standard provision for wind projects or solar projects because you never know what the General Assembly is going to do. So this is the estimated assessed value. And as we talked about before in the context of Toyota, the majority of property tax rates here in Gibson County and really throughout the state are subject to what we call the maximum levy, which means that the state controls how much revenue you can raise in those funds on a year-over-year basis and the growth in those funds. And you're all probably intimately aware of that because you're on the tail end of your budget process where you talk about this. So growth in assessed value doesn't necessarily mean growth in property tax revenues. What it really means is you're growing that tax base, and if you grow that tax base faster than you're growing your levies, you're going to see a decrease in your property tax rates. Now, for the purposes of this analysis, we held everything else constant in terms of assuming no other assessed value growth in the county, assuming no changes in property tax rates or levies throughout the county, because what we wanted to do is isolate the impact of this specific project. Now, we understand in the real world there's going to be other changes out there, but what we're trying to do here is just see, okay, what does this project specifically mean, and specifically in Center and Barton Township. So you see the impact on property tax rates going from certified 2020 rates of $1.58 in Center Township, $1.62 in Barton Township, down to $1.40 after the expiration of the property tax abatements in Center Township and $1.46 in Barton Township. So just to give an idea of what that impact would be, and that would be realized by the taxpayers in those townships and really throughout the county because of the county rate getting impacted as well. Here we just tried to quantify that for different taxpayer types in the two townships. The median home value per the Census Bureau in Gibson County is $110,300. So the median homeowner in Center Township would see a decrease of about $67, in Barton Township about $62. And then we've also included ag land and business as well for reference purposes. And again, that's holding all else constant. We understand how the calculations will actually play out. We also want to recognize that this project is going to be paying property taxes. And these property taxes, rather than thinking about them as additional revenues for the overlapping units, this is this project is going to be paying property taxpayers that other property taxes that other property taxpayers won't have to pay. So over time, that goes from $135,000 in year one of the proposed abatement to $732,000 a year following the expiration of the property tax abatement. And that, after the expiration of abatement, roughly breaks down into about, let's see, a total, $608,000 from the utility property, $53,000 from real property improvements, and $70,000 from the increase in land valuation. Now, we've got the same graphics for the 5-year 100%. They're not as exciting in terms of how they look because they're flat for those 5 years. There's not that gradual stair step up. So you see it flat for the first 5 years, and then following the expiration of the abatement, it jumps up to the $51.5 million of assessed value. Similar impacts on property tax rates, impacts on homeowners. Actually, after the expiration of the property tax abatement, the impact is identical because you're working from the same amount of assessed value coming into the tax base, and the same type of thing with the property taxes from the proposed investment. We felt that it would be helpful to approach it in this way using graphics and a high-level look. We have a more detailed analysis with the underlying numbers if people are interested in that. I know that we have shared that, Jim, has received that electronically. I have hard copies with me if people would like that. Understanding that as information evolves, we'll be updating that, but happy to share that if members of the council would like to see the underlying detail as well. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Matt, I apologize. I can't, was the amount 500,000 on the proposed economic development payment for option 2?
I cannot remember the economic development payment amount off the top of my head. Mary, you,
I thought it was
750.
750.
So if it was 5 years, 100% abatement, the company would make a $750,000 economic development payment to the county.
And then I've sat in all the meetings. I wanted to make sure the rest of the council and anybody concerned in the audience understands what that economic development payment can be used for, and the advantage potentially of that over, just having for the county as opposed to just having an increase in the AV and a somewhat of a tax rate decrease.
Sure. The typical approach is for the county to establish a separate account that's outside the standard budget, and that becomes more fungible money that counties can then deploy as they see fit. Ostensibly, they look at it for economic development projects, but I've seen it used for all kinds of different projects. Sometimes it's allocated to the overlapping taxing units like the schools, the library. It will be at the discretion of the local decision makers like yourselves to determine how you want to set that up and then treat the disbursement of those funds. But it would be outside of, that would actually be new money, and that wouldn't go just in your general fund. You'd set up a separate fund for that.
The only thing I could recommend is on this option 2, that's where the $750,000, that it be stated in this
Add that
option
note.
2. So, we're looking at something that I
You
just
just
not
call it
stated,
that.
so you need to get it stated in here so we can.
I will make that note.
Okay, appreciate it.
Yeah, and I also, Matt, I didn't notice. I saw a $22 million number and a $23 million number, I thought, on the total property taxes that they'll pay net of the abatements, but seeing that difference clearly would probably put the $750,000 EDA into perspective.
Sure.
And then is Paul there today?
He was.
Yeah.
He was. Okay, because I think Paul had a few options in mind for what maybe appropriate projects for that EDA money to help that district.
750,000, what type of project?
Yeah, I had talked with the previous superintendent of East Gibson Schools and the current superintendent of East Gibson Schools, and they've got several projects over there. One particular project they've got is kids now coming from the 7th grade below, going into high school, have to go outside the building and around and come in, and so they were going to do something to make that, so the kids would not have to do that. Another project was their air conditioning in the gymnasium, and another project that was redoing some parking lots in a couple of grade schools. So there are things that money could be used for specifically here.
But the money can only be used in Barton Center.
It's my understanding, Eric.
No, it can be
It
used,
can be used anywhere.
anywhere the county is, at the
Anywhere.
council at discretion, yes.
I just happened to call.
Okay.
Them just because that's where the project was.
Yeah.
And, we all know that side of the county and their school corporation desperately needs help.
Yeah, and I know, Matt, I think you and I had this conversation, I believe I had it with Craig. This idea of economic development payments has been around the state for about 12 years. It started up in Benton County, White County, that had large sums of money coming in on wind projects. And so the reason I mention this is these counties have literally spent this money over the last 10, 12 years. State Board of Accounts has not challenged it, to our understanding. Said, hey, as long as it's a proper government purpose, county council commissioners, you can spend it anywhere you want to in the county on whether it's infrastructure, human services, economic development purposes, parks, what have you, schools. So there's great discretion, is what I'm trying to say.
And other counties around us have accepted economic development payments.
Here's a question, I mean, what we talked about earlier in the year about the broadband coming and everything else. We got denied for the grant and everything. Would that be something that could be done without the grant with this money or not?
As far as I know.
Yeah, I think so. I'm aware of one county that has used monies for broadband and internet, wireless sort of, I mean, bringing the internet to the rural areas, is that what you're speaking of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
'cause
believe
we
that.
started that project, I don't know, earlier in the year sometime, maybe like last year. And then we went through the grant process and it got cut off. We didn't get the grant. So I didn't know if that would increase or we could do, I know we wouldn't be able to do all of it with 750,000, but would it be something where we could do something along that line for?
There are companies out there that we're dealing with and that want to come in, but, right now it's not feasible. So yes, it could potentially be good.
Was that a state grant that you had gone for on the broadband?
Correct.
Yes.
Because internet in the county is
Sure.
less than desirable.
That's something I hear a lot, and not just in Indiana. I've got colleagues working in other parts of the country on some programs, but we can talk some more about that.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Turn back up.
All right.
Jail.
Last week, the Gibson County Commissioners approved, let me back up. As you know, you're in a litigation in the United States District Court, Third District, Indiana. A federal lawsuit has been filed against the sheriff in Gibson County concerning the jail, our old jail here. Gibson County entered into a stipulation settlement agreement with the court and ACLU some months back, and it has certain timelines in that agreement. One of the first hurdles of that agreement would be selection of a greenfield site or refurbishing the old county jail. And the mechanism, second part of that step is financing either for the new greenfield site or the regulation legal jail site. As you know, we do have some cash reserves, we do have some edit money, and we do have the jail tax is already in place. So I have asked Rick Connor to come down here from Structure Point, the lead architect, to discuss the differences between the estimated cost of the differences of the greenfield site and renovation of the old site. And keep in mind, there's also the operational expenses of either one of those as well coming into play. So without any, and so to summarize, at the end of this presentation, we're asking the council to make a selection whether the greenfield site or the old existing site can be renovated. I will need that decision today, so today is the deadline day. That I handed out to you. And just so you know, the commissioner just picked the greenfield site last week. And here we have Jeff Clark here, starting the jail committee. And I'm back over here.
Dan Whitehaven.
Pronounce your last name. So we have everybody here to answer your questions on this. I'll take you through it. Good morning.
As Jim indicated, in August of 17, I think, the Indiana Department of Corrections issued a letter to the county basically saying that the jail was in non-compliance. We mentioned to you then that we also had a lawsuit that's since been settled. This is a settlement agreement in place. And really the main things that they were complaining about there on the right, number one, overcrowding. Number two, the inability to properly classify and separate inmates. Number three, inadequate staffing. And then lastly, just the general safety risk to staff and inmates. In June of this year, I presented before the council a multi-step approach to evaluate possible solutions to help alleviate these problems. Basically confirm the population projection, to compare actual drawings of a layout of different options, to perform a staffing analysis, to try to get a handle on the operational costs of the jail, and then lastly, to put together actual cost estimates of what it would cost to build a jail and operate it. The biggest problem with the current jail, besides capacity, is an inability to properly separate inmates by classification. The National Institute of Corrections requires the actual inmate population to be 20% less than the rated bed capacity to allow for proper separation of inmates. So this would be separation of males from females, violent from non-violent, low risk from medium risk or maximum risk, predator from prey, and the like. The jail is overcrowded when the population is in excess of the rated bed capacity, but it's also in non-compliance and overcrowded if it cannot satisfy this 20% classification margin. That's an important concept to understand. Your jail has a rated capacity of 118 beds. The actual population on the average day in 2019 was 128. The peak population was 169 on January 19th of 2019. And 41 of those 169 were level 6 felons that you received from the state of Indiana. The inmate population in the jail was over its 118 rated bed capacity on 244 days of the 365 days of 2019. So our first step was to project the inmate population trends over time. And we examined the current data, we looked at 7 years of history as provided by your sheriff, and we developed this curve that projects out 20 years. It's a little close up to see. The results show that 288 beds are required to provide proper housing 20 years out, and 218 beds are required to provide proper housing 10 years out. Most capital projects are planned for a minimum of a 20-year life. Your current community corrections has 120 beds capacity in 6 dormitories. The average population on the average day in 2019 was 43. The peak was 53 in August of 2014. And if we plot the trend line based upon your history, it shows that approximately 61 beds are required 20 years out. So it's a little oversized. The percentage of female versus male inmates is an important component of classification. So this graph shows the percentage of females has been growing steadily, and that is a trend that we see nationally. I'm not sure that I believe that we would ever get to 50-50 in 20 years out, but it would be wise to configure a new jail that's separated into many different cell blocks to accommodate that type of split. The next step is very important to the accuracy of the financial results. We took the program and developed functional building layouts that are detailed enough to determine accurate correctional staff placement and construction cost estimates. So these are plans, these plans that you're about to see are scale layouts
that will work for your jail. They're preliminary and they can be refined and approved upon as we move into building design, but they are plans that will work in your facility. We developed 3 options to this level of sophistication. Option 1 is shown here. It's what we call the 20-year greenfield solution. Option 2 is a 10-year greenfield solution. And option 3 is a 20-year solution that is essentially the expansion of your current downtown jail. Dan's going to come forward and walk you through each one of these layouts.
I'm just going to go through these real briefly. We've really organized the building into two pieces, and it's pretty easy to see. That one work? Okay. Which one goes first?
We got blue, brown, and top and bottom.
Yeah.
Shoot it at the ceiling first. If you shoot it right at the screen, sometimes it,
Okay, here we go. Thank you. We really have this rectangle here, made up primarily of this section over here is the sheriff's department. This is the public access and where the public will enter the building. Staff enters over on this side. Jail administration here, vehicle sally port here. So inmates come in, go in through pre-booking, booking, inmate property through here, kitchen and laundry in the middle here, medical here, and then back into the housing area here. The housing area is very typically laid out with a ground floor and a mezzanine, which is shown here. This, as Rick was saying, we took a lot of effort to make the sizes. There we go. We made the sizes of these so that the sheriff would have a lot of options for classification and housing different kinds of inmates. The only last thing I'm going to go, the only thing that's different between option 1 and option 2 is that this section right here would be built 10 years out. So that would get you to your 20-year goal, but you'd be delaying that part of the housing, and you'd also be delaying the community corrections, which is this area here. So otherwise, the other areas are all identical. That's the greenfield options. And again, the same with the mezzanine. This is the option for expanding the existing jail, just to give you a little bit of sense of orientation. Here's the addition to the downtown jail. Currently, the old jail and sheriff's department is here, and community corrections is here. This is we'll call it ground level, and you can see I'm keeping community corrections offices and 3 of the dorms to serve as the community corrections, jail administration, and sheriff's department, so the public would enter on this side over here. We're maintaining and upgrading the existing cells, and then adding in the back 2 sets of a ground level and a mezzanine. That's 4 levels of jail. Going down, continuing up, you can see we've got this is your existing 2nd floor of the jail. Jail administration moves to the 2nd floor in the center there. Sheriff's office over on this side, so they stack. And then the cell areas all continue to stack. All the way up to the 3rd floor would be more of the cells. And we're going to site.
Yeah. So we were provided 5 greenfield sites, and then of course we have the existing site downtown. And each are located in reasonable proximity to downtown. It's important to say that we do see a predominance of jail projects moving out of downtown due to 2 reasons, really, to the sizable amount of land that's needed to efficiently lay out a facility, and secondly, just due to the negative
first site we evaluated is the Crabtree site located on South Main. It's 25 acres and happens, we just found out actually, happens to lie right above the old King mine. Another challenge to this site is its potential requirement to upgrade an adjacent sanitary lift station. Another challenge is the potential for some wetland mitigation about the middle of the site. The site is pretty narrow, long and narrow, but you can see the 20-year solution, the 20-year greenfield solution does fit on the property just fine. It also accommodates very well expansion beyond 20 years. So a lot of times when I get into a project like this and you're trying to figure out how much we're going to build to set the next thing, my big question is, what are we going to do 20 years from now? You know, so that we don't get in the same position that we're in at the downtown part. So that hatched area is meant to represent the direction that we would expand the jail should it be necessary 20 years out.
I got a question while we're on that site.
Yes, sir.
It's located on the old mine. Has anybody even looked at underneath the ground? Yeah. I don't want,
We haven't sunk it and said, no, there's no way that you can build here. We just quite honestly just found out here recently that it was located over the mine. So it would require further examination to see if you could put it here. There's probably other ideas too. I mean, I understand that there's a willing seller here. I think that's important. You can certainly farm on this. Maybe there's an opportunity to trade something. You know, so I think it does have viability, but you can see there are some development challenges to actually build something there. So anyway, that was the first one. The second one we evaluated is the Douglas property, located on West McCarty Road. It's 123 acres, which is way larger than we need. But the northwest corner of this property would work very well. Actually, the south corner would also work, but it has access challenges. There's quite a bit of fall across this property, so earthwork would tend to be expensive. On the good side, fiber is in the vicinity. I would give this site a green check mark if you consider it. We looked at the Morrow site, thirdly, on West Alabama Street. It's 52 acres. And we don't need all of that either. But the north portion of that property could work. Rail bounds the entire west property line, and access to the south part of the property would be difficult, which is why we're looking at the north. The likelihood of wetlands exists between the north and the south portions of the site, but I would give this one a green check mark too. I think it requires further examination like the first one, but I think it's got possibilities. The next site we evaluated was the Rising property on West 100 North. It's 15 acres and is extremely tight in the east-west direction. There's over 30 feet of fall across the property, which would result in heavy earthwork, maybe retaining walls. It appears it would require a sanitary sewer extension and some off-site drainage improvements. I would say this site is not a great consideration. And then the last greenfield site we looked at was the Taylor property, also on West 100 North. It's only 8 acres and really too small for your jail. The property has drainage issues. The whole property is about 2 feet lower, 2 or 3 feet lower than the adjacent road. There's rail and a coal ramp to the west, which could block access to the property. Sanitary main extension would be required to develop this site. I would say this one's probably not a great site for consideration either. If greenfield is the way you want to go, I would suggest negotiating with the 2 or 3 best sites that we see out there. They're all a little bit different. They're different with respect to acreage that you would have to buy and the cost challenges to develop the sites are different. The purchase price will likely not be the only determining factor when you go over sites, and we'll help guide guide you through that process. Expansion of the existing jail located in Emerson and Maine will be a challenge. You got a little bit of a feel for that when Dan showed you the floor plan. We don't see any problems from a drainage standpoint or soils or what have you, but it's just so very small. The site is constrained at the north by the Monument Company, and they've been very clear that they don't want to. The only option is to demolish the old 1948 jail and build 170 bed addition. We got 118 now. We need 170 bed addition. And the other space that we need, you have to build it vertically on multiple floors, which is what Dan alluded to. The adjacent streets would be required to satisfy the increasing parking needs, or the county would have to purchase adjacent property for another parking lot. The advantage to developing these two-scale layouts of each option is that with those two-scale layouts, we can perform accurate staffing analysis. And the cost of staffing a jail, the cost of staffing your jail today is 50% of the operating cost. So staffing is really, really important. Sheriff Bottoms provided us with a detailed breakdown of what has been budgeted and what has been spent in your jail, and I've created a large spreadsheet of all these costs going back to 2015, so I got a pretty good handle on what you've been spending. These costs do not include, for the staff, FICA and FERS and health insurance. We'll account for that later. This slide here shows the staff costs in the existing jail for this year, 2020. The staff are broken down by job function, and the numbers came straight from the sheriff. So the first column shows how the jail was staffed when I started my analysis on June 20th, and I'm told it's essentially the same today. We have 15 and a half people. The half kind of is a way to account for overtime. The second pair of columns show the budget that was approved by the council and most recently amended, and the dollars associated with the staffing that was approved. So you guys approved 24 people, and there's the numbers that kind of went along with that. The next pair of columns show what we recommend for staffing in the existing jail according to the National Jail Standards, and the budgeted dollars that would be required. So I'm just taking those same figures and making them 30/24 figures. So it's close to the council budget, just a little bit bigger. Then the last column shows a study that was done in 2017, they called the Wilson study. And the only difference between our recommendation and the Wilson study is in the rounding of partial staff positions. And in our opinion, as professional jail experts, you can't have half a person. You either have the whole thing or not. In this next slide, we take the 2020 council budget and our recommendation, and we inflate these costs to 2023, which would be the first year that the new jail would be in operation. So we build it in 21 and 22, and start operating in 23. This next staffing slide shows the staff counts required and the associated 2023 dollars for the 288 Greenfield option 1 and the 196 bed Greenfield option 2, according to those layouts that Dan showed you. So these are the exact staff positions that you need to operate the jail at those sizes. And then the last slide shows the staff counts required and the associated 2023 dollars for the 170 bed expansion to your 118 bed existing jail, which is option 3. The other column to the right actually shows option 3 if it was only being operated at 140 inmates, which would likely be the case in 2023. Now we'll get into the good part. Pay attention, Matt. This slide shows, assuming the project was bid next year, the total project costs, including soft costs like land, design fees, equipment, for each of the three options. Option one is the full 288 bed greenfield option. Option two is essentially the same as option number one. However, the housing component was reduced to 196 and community corrections was eliminated. So option two would serve the county's needs for close to 10 years, then the jail would have to be expanded. Option three is the 170 bed expansion of the existing jail, bringing it to 288 beds, and the construction of new space and the remodel of existing space to facilitate updated jail administration, booking, and the new sheriff's office. This option is extremely inefficient because it's on multiple levels and requires extensive circulation space, including elevators, and this is what makes it the most expensive choice. The bottom of this slide shows the total project cost for each option. I think these numbers are safe. I think you could possibly do better than this because of what might be a down year next year because of COVID. These are the numbers you would ask Matt to figure out how to finance, the ones at the bottom of every sheet. The next slide shows the same three options from an annual cost to operate perspective. So at the top are those total project costs that we saw at the bottom of the previous slide, right at the very top, above the yellow line. Can't really see that stuff in here. So I had conversations with Matt, and he was kind enough to provide me some additional information. I think you got it too, Jen, or some of the rest of you do. What Matt's basically been working with is three legs of the stool as far as funding. An initial one-time cash contribution, the proceeds from the correctional facilities tax, and then lastly, about $550,000 a year from the county's economic development income tax. And from Matt's most current analysis, what it basically shows is that those three funding mechanisms would just about fund option two. Okay? The cost of options 1 and 3 are higher than that, what is that, 34.36 million of option 2. So I asked Matt to run those as well, so we could have a meaningful conversation today. So instead of $550,000 per year out of ed, option 1 would need 913 roughly, and option 3 would need 1,127,000 annually. Now there'll also be some adjustments to what it costs to operate the jail. First of all, each option requires somewhat different staffing. That's what we were talking about. If we anticipate 2023 as the first year of operation, option 1 and option 2 will each require a staff of 24 at about $63,000 a year over what you budgeted for this year. Same number of jailers, coincidentally, 24. That's what you budgeted for this year, and that's what you need to operate. But more cost because there's 3 years of inflation to get to 2023.
Hang on, I'll stop you just a second. On your figure on option 2, you've got community corrections not going to the new site, correct? Is that staffing community corrections also? Because right now, correct me if I'm wrong, Sheriff, that they sometimes pull a little bit of double duty at nighttime for community corrections and the jail. So is that number in there, or is
It amounts to about half the jailer is the double duty. The 6 people that you have that work in community corrections, 5, something like that, those numbers are not in here at all. So, that's completely, a completely separate budget. Part of the reason for the half a jailer down in community corrections is because you have real live jail inmates being housed in community corrections.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I understand what you're saying, and what I'm getting at is, right now, the jailers at night cover community corrections. If we go to a Greenfield side, they're not gonna be able to drive across town to go check on them over there and then drive back and check on them out here. That's why I was wondering, is that cost figured into option 2?
That cost is not figured into option 2.
That's why I wanted to know.
So it's important to understand that we're using the staff cost to operate the jail in 2023 when the jail is not at the 20-year capacity, or even the 10-year capacity, but that 2023 average inmate count of about 140 or so. So that's what these staffing numbers are illustrating. So option 3, because of the inefficiencies of adding 4 stories of housing to the already inefficient 118-bed facility, requires a staff of 36 to operate that at a cost of $862,000 over your 2020 budget to handle an inmate population of 140. And Jeremy, I added, that number's bigger than what the jail committee saw. I added an amount in there for FICA, perks, and healthcare. So that's why that number is a lot bigger than what you saw before. The other thing to note in terms of operating costs is today you guys spend a really big amount of money to keep the old jail running. Costs like elevator maintenance, HVAC maintenance, as well as plumbing and electrical repairs would not be necessary if you move to a greenfield site or if the jail is completely refurbished. With option 2, you still continue to operate community corrections, so it's a little unclear if these expenses would continue, but they might. So there's a little bit of a credit for that. So the effect on the general fund from an operating standpoint is really not large with options 1 and 2, but it is considerable with option 3. And that's because of the increased staffing expense to operate that 4-story jail.
Question?
Yes.
Had it been considered of another option without the bed expansion, but with community correction out there?
To put inmates in community?
No, you build a community correction with the jail, but not the 288 bed.
Do an option 2 with community correction.
Yeah, option 2
I
with
did
community.
not. We could look at that.
Well, I think it needs to be looked at.
We could definitely look at that. It would be, I mean, you can get a rough idea. It'd be somewhere in between, dollar figure, somewhere in between option 1 and 2.
Option 2 with community correction.
Yes. What are we looking at there? 42 million versus 34. So talk about $8 million difference.
Go ahead, Chair.
On top of, community corrections needing additional staffing, you're going to be looking at additional people for staffing the kitchen too. So they have to be fed, so they're not out of work. That's just another thing to consider.
Yeah,
I've got
I think
some.
Mike's got a good point that might be something we finance. I mean, it's all gonna, have to say, a lot of it's gonna boil down to what we can
Except
do.
the way community corrections are now, you're going to
Yeah.
have people.
It really needs to be with the jail, cut down a lot of costs.
I've got an idea later on that might respond to your statement there. let's keep on going here. So the bottom part of this slide, you know, every county, almost every county that has built a new jail, has built it to satisfy some future time horizon. So it's been built larger than what's initially needed. So what ends up happening is they use the extra space to house other counties' inmates, or in some cases, federal prisoners. So this is just an illustration to show you that if Gibson housed just 50 inmates from other counties, they could realize income of $684,000 per year. And then after they fed them and provided a little extra staff to watch them, they'd have a bottom line credit of about $173,000 a year. Jeremy, again, I increased those numbers that you saw in the jail committee meeting for FICA and FERC and healthcare, and then also inmate medical. So to put things into perspective, the amount at the bottom of this slide is the amount of edit that would be required to fund the project if all these things were taken into consideration. It's important to realize the edit burden on options 1 and 3 could be even less if more out-of-county inmates were housed or if federal inmates were housed instead, because the going rate for federal inmates is about double what it is for normal inmates. Option 3, with its 4 levels of housing, requires so much circulation space, it's expensive to operate and it's also expensive to build. I mean, you could take, just assume that you understaff option 3, you build option 3 and you understaff it, it dies in the comparison because it's so expensive to build. Even if you could build it for the same price, but you operated it properly, it would still die. And when you add these two together, it's not even close. So it's just really not very competitive. This slide shows a comparison of each option, just kind of a summary. So option 1, it's the most efficient staffing solution. You can guard the most inmates with the least amount of staff. It solves your problem for 20 years. You fund it with edit, and you reimburse edit. That's probably not exactly the right financial term to use, but you reimburse edit with these out-of-county inmate proceeds. And then the other thing it does is it opens up a city block, or almost a city block, for development. Option 2, the tenure solution, it satisfies the funding plan. You know, use 550 out of edit in the community or the correctional facility staff. It's also a very efficient staffing solution, but it requires a 92-bed addition 10 years down the road that today would cost $8 million, and down the road 10 years would cost $11 million. And you look at Matt's funding analysis, in those wee years, you're basically kind of like adding 10 years to your borrowing, and those years at the end, it is well over $1 million a year in debt service. And then option 2, as the sheriff alluded to, it would require remote operation of community corrections and transporting meals. Either you're going to have to staff the old kitchen or you're going to have to transport meals from the new kitchen. Option 3, it is the most expensive construction cost, mostly because the site is so small and you have to go vertical. It's the most expensive to staff. It perpetuates the dangerous vertical movements and accentuates the dangerous vertical movements. I don't think I'd want to work in the jail if I had to take inmates up and down an elevator. And then lastly, it's the most difficult to build. It would require multiple phases to build. So our recommendation is option 1 is the best choice, and the reasoning behind that is because it really provides the least expensive alternate for the taxpayers over the life of the jail. In terms of the next steps, Jim alluded to the settlement agreement has certain requirements. The way I read it by today, we have to tell the court whether we're going to do a greenfield solution or expand the existing. And the second thing we have to tell them is how are we going to fund it? And it doesn't necessarily say how big of a jail are we going to fund or how much money are we going to put forward, but they want to know how it's to be funded. The court then is required to monitor certain activities as far as the settlement agreement goes. So they want to see this pre-design work that we've done. They want to see a purchase agreement. They want a construction timeline, engineering drawings along the way. And then just from a project schedule standpoint, big picture, we estimate that it would take 6 to 7 months to design the new jail, followed by, say, a 4 to 6 week bidding and contract award for construction, and then approximately 18-month duration to build it. And if you add all that stuff up from where we are today, the January 23 occupancy that's a requirement of the settlement agreement is definitely achievable. So at this point, I would pause and answer questions or.
So today, we just gotta pick. We're gonna do remodel the existing jail or greenfield.
Yes, sir. I'm not talking about size, I'm not talking about how much money out of each fund. We just identify the funding sources, which is cash reserve, jail tax, correctional facility tax, and edit. Not asking you to put a number on them, just identifying those three funds, funding sources. Then I'm asking which for you to choose between greenfield and existing site. Once I have that in a resolution signed off, then we can notify the court. And then we go into the next steps as to site selection, design phase, what design do you want to go looking at. Once we get the design, we got to get coordinated with Matt, how we're going to fund it, how all that's going to look. So,
Okay, we got to dump it down.
So in the design phase, like you said, there's gonna be other options than the 3 we've got right now that if we come up with them.
I think we sit down and talk about it, you know.
yeah, and then you go into what you're asking to do a design, but the thing I want to point out is you can design anything, but you can have alternate bids. When you go after bids, you can have, well, this is the overall thing we would want to bid out, but also we'd like you to look at alternate bid selection too, which could be a community correction site. So you know when the bids come in, we got Baker Tilly on board saying, you know, we have to borrow power and X amount of dollars. That bid comes in on bid phase 1, and that's the only amount you can do. Then you have to work, and we just have to go with that. But with an alternate bid type of scenario, how you bid it out, the bids come in, and let's say that bid for phase 1 comes in at 32 million because there's just been everybody's out there is hungry and they sharpen the pencils, and then we have another 2-3 million on the community corrections, and then you fit within that budget. So I'm just saying there's different ways you can bid your projects to give yourself different alternatives, different choices when those bids come in. These are all estimated costs, so we don't know what it will do. If we can get the design and up and running for bids, and I'm going to go out something maybe June or May or June of next year to go out for bids. You understand what I'm saying? Or May. We're going to maybe get into a cycle where we can start some type of construction, which I don't know what the interest rates are going to be. I don't know what the climate's going to be next year, but all indications are that we're going to be in a very good position on the bids, because there's gonna be a lot of other companies out there wanting to do it. So
Here's kind of a strategy going forward that I would suggest to you. Number one, what I would do if I were you, we know 288 beds is a 20-year. What I would do is I would plan that 288 bed layout. Maybe we tweak it a little bit here or there for, you know, people's input. But I would plan that with 2 deduct alternates. So that's the full jail, option 1 that you had the sticker shock on when you saw the number. But I would put that one out for bids, and I would put 2 deduct alternates in there. One is the 92 bed part of it that takes it down to 196, right? So we take that out. And the other alternate would be to take out community corrections. But we'll get those prices.
Well,
We'll get 3 numbers.
But they want the community correction and on one.
Right, so we'll get 3 numbers, and you can always build those 1 or more of those pieces later, right, if you had to, or what Jim's saying is, God, what if we just got lucky bids? I mean, the last thing you'd want to do is not bid some stuff that you really want, like community corrections, and then find out you got low construction prices, you got money left over, you know, so I'm thinking that you ought to go plan the whole thing, put those 2 in as deduct alternates, and let's see what ends up happening. Then the second piece of the strategy is to get the best price for whatever it is you do decide to build. And I think there's there's probably more than one idea on how to get the best price, but I think one is to get the plans out for bid as soon as possible, as early as possible in 2021. To be able to take it for 2 reasons. One, you get to take advantage of this what I think is going to be a competitive market next year. I don't think there's going to be as many projects, right? So there's going to be bidders out there that are hungry. So number one, get it out early so you can take advantage of that. Then number 2, get it out early so that you can actually get the site cleared, get foundations in the ground, get stuff coming up out of the ground before we get to winter. It'd be horrible to dork around and not get going on design and be sitting here in February still talking about getting going. And then by the time you get it designed, it's this time of the year, and now you can't hardly get much done because, you know, winter's gonna be upon us. So I think those are 2 really good ways to have an opportunity to get good pricing. Then the third element of the strategy is not up there, but it needs to be, it is to get going on the site. So we've got lots of site ideas that we need to somehow bring to fruition, get an option on one that we think is the best, do some exploratory soil borings, what have you, spend a little bit of money, convince ourselves that it's the best before the county buys it, and then start planning the project on that site. But I'm going to tell you that the biggest thing is, you know, getting started with design and then moving deliberately through that process. It's going to save you money.
Silly question, maybe. How many jails you guys built? How many in this size range, like 218?
I'd say 10 or something like that here recently.
Do you have to redesign and build from scratch, redesign a whole new facility every time you build a jail, or you cannot utilize some of your previous plans or something, or does it?
I think that's why you hire someone like us, because we do have that jail experience, and we bring that jail experience to every new design that we come up with. Basically, yes, we take ideas from other projects we
have to redesign a new one.
It's not necessarily a redesign, it's taking a design that we use somewhere else, customizing it for the sheriff's needs. Not every sheriff has the exact same needs.
Okay.
So it's not like, you know, Little Red Schoolhouse where you have a template and everybody builds exactly the same thing. That doesn't work for jails.
Okay.
A lot of it has to do with how big you want the cell
No.
I mean, maybe do one or something, but you can't.
And the other thing you have to think about is jails now, they have different classifications. You cannot commingle everybody together, you have to separate. So, we have a large increase of female population in our jail now.
They have to be
Which
cited,
may be
cited,
above the average
cited,
for the state or local. So that's some other things we have to look at.
What is pretty common anymore is that you have what they call, direct supervision, indirect.
Indirect supervision.
So you've got someone in a space. Control center that can look at multiple cell blocks.
Yeah.
And that's what's cutting down on the staffing. You guys don't have that in your existing jail, and it doesn't really happen very well when you expand the existing jail. That's why we ended up with so many darn jailers.
So back around to the beginning, I guess the decision today for the council is Greenfield site versus existing site. And funding sources, which I did.
Anybody, Jeremy or Derek, do you have any comments?
No, I mean, it won't be any surprise to Jim or to Rick. I'm not comfortable with any of the financial choices that were laid out in front of us. I just don't. I just don't see how we can bank on Rick. One of the things when we look at that cost and say, okay, well, we could make money housing extra prisoners. What we're not considering there is the incremental cost per bed of building it big enough that we can hold them. And that's my biggest concern. I still think that $35 million number, using $550,000 out of edit, is unrealistic, especially when we don't account for overages or other soft costs that could come in that could cause us additional. If we're doing a greenfield site, where do we have money budgeted to demolish the old jail, or does it just sit there? And I think those are all factors that, quite frankly, at this point in the, I just don't, I feel like the evidence is mounted that we can't put it on the existing site. But I don't know that I'm ready to commit to this size of a project and tell them that we're going to be able to fund it when I know we can't.
Derek, do you have anything?
Not anything of value that Jeremy didn't already say. I'm in the same boat. I just don't see the funding levels there. I don't see any options with what we currently have in existence that's going to give us any value in the county. I mean, obviously, it's looking like we got to go greenfield. I just have no idea how we're going to pay for it with those numbers that they're showing us.
Mike, do you have anything else?
No.
Dan?
Same thoughts as Jeremy and Derek brought up. I mean, I think it was the ultimate goal that if we could keep it within the footprint of our existing location, just because of the inner workings of the jail, the courts, and all that. But, based on those costs, that probably does not make sense at all. So I guess my vote would have been preferably to stay within the location, but Greenfield first is the preferred route. I too, I just don't see how we can pay for that size of a project. And there's other people that can say yes, you can. I don't know. From my understanding of the finances and what the tax is going to bring in and what the and all that, 34, 35, like Jeremy said, just could be a real burden, and I just don't know that we can take that on.
Well, that's why we have Baker Tilly here and Matt Eckerly to figure all that out.
Right.
And today, I'm only here to want to discuss Greenfield.
So if we as a council, we agree Greenfield. We agree that
You're not
there's.
agreeing to a design, you're not agreeing to a size, you're not agreeing to an amount. And asking you to do, we just want to bring all that up to you now. So you have,
So I mean, if we said that, as a consensus, the council says Greenfield, here's, that's the answer there. And we are willing to support the project with funding. And the funding mechanism would be the
cash reserve, correctional facility tax. Correctional facility tax,
so combination of funding that is in place and all that.
yes.
There's been some discussion that you cannot commit edit to a project of this magnitude or this length. I thought that they've done it elsewhere from what I've read in the papers and all that. There has been a couple of individuals that have mentioned that you cannot commit edit funds for the next 27 years for a capital project.
I'm not to speak out of turn, sorry. I'm not aware of any restrictions. Just last year, Delaware County did a 25-year lease using existing edit to do a new jail project.
Because I was pretty sure that's what Pike County did years ago. They enacted an edit tax. That's what they funded theirs, and then the tax continued on for other projects and all that. So if we, as a council, if we agree, Greenfield funding source, the three that you've mentioned, it does not obligate us to say that we are in agreement with the $35 million project or 44 or whatever it is. So if you, today, that decision is Greenfield funding source, the three noted funds. If through accounting and all that, they say that this is the most that you can spend, then you revise your. I think that's the biggest hang up right now is we don't want to say that we're endorsing a 34 or $44 million project.
Well, I don't think you're just saying we want to move forward with the Greenfield site and these are the funding sources. That's all that resolution.
And then it'll be operational on or before January of 2023.
That's what the agreement says on the court order.
But there is.
That's what the court order in federal court is already signed says. I'm not making up something different.
Yeah, but I
Hey,
think,
I have a question for Jim.
Yeah.
go ahead.
So, with this court documents and we're going, as long as we're making substantial progress, will there not be options for extensions or whatever, like every other court case that's in the world that keeps
Well, yeah,
doing
I think that's
continuances?
I think that's a possibility, but we can't delay, some things. I mean, if we're under construction and we need a few more months to complete construction, I don't think that's a problem. But if we haven't even started construction by January 23, I think you're going to hear from the federal court way before that.
That's
To answer your question, but yes, Derek, I think we get into a time frame. If we're doing everything that we possibly can do to honor the stipulated agreement, then I think you can ask for certain extensions, but you've got to show substantial progress.
Yeah, that's what, same thing I was gonna ask, like, if we come along and we have a blizzard and they can't do construction for 2-3 months and we're not,
Well, I think a COVID limiting supplies may be a more realistic thing.
yeah, or,
I think you might be having some problems getting some certain type of materials, like right now, I think you have a certain type of, you have problems getting particle board.
Yeah.
If you're building, you have certain problems getting a certain type of roofing. Things that ship in from China are sitting out on Cisco. So, there's all kinds of other factors that come in. Weather, you're right, Jay, weather can come in. We could have a terrible weather or flooding or whatever, but I think we've got to make substantial progress ourselves, as far as showing the court that we are trying.
Well, I'll go on and say that given all the options that we've been given, regardless of how my previous feelings were, what's been shown and presented to us, and we have no more options, doing and dealing with what we currently have in existence isn't a valid option for finances. I think we have to look towards Greenfield now, whether I agree with it or not. It's just the options we've been given. But with that, we don't have to vote on size and money or anything like that. I would like a lot more investigation done into the trends. I'm not agreeing 100% with we need a 288 bed facility. Not saying it's not gonna happen, but I don't know if in 20 years that's where the trends are going, given the government and how they're doing bonds and issues like that. So I definitely want more input on that. But as far as I'm concerned today, in order to stay up with the core documents, I'll go with the greenfield with the funding sources that are in place.
You want to make that a motion?
I guess, unfortunately, I'll make that motion.
Have a motion, have a second to go with the Greenfield site and further discuss.
For clarification, Derek, the funding sources in place, you're talking about the jail tax edit and what else?
Cash reserves they're talking of.
You want to read this? You
I-
usually do.
I can read it to you. You want me to read it to you, Jeremy?
I just want to know, I mean, I don't know that we can issue a resolution that commits to funding it with anything except for the jail tax. Can we?
Well, I think the commissioners have agreed to identify, what, you're identifying what sources you're gonna pay out of.
That was my understanding. I'm not agreeing to paying any funds. I'm agreeing that we've identified there's money there.
Sources.
Okay. I just not with the election loom. I don't know if that'll be a fact in January. I hate to sign up for something and they say, well, you said you were going to, when I know it's possible that I don't know how that funding will be beyond the next budget cycle.
Let me correct my wording. My wording is that we go with the greenfield and we've identified funding sources. I'm not saying we're spending anything and I'm not saying we're committing anything. I think according to what I've been reading and what I've been told, all we had to do is identify funding.
Now, you had to identify funding sources, not the amount or if you're gonna use anything out of anything.
I agree with what Jeremy's saying. I'm not saying we're gonna commit. I'm not gonna say we're spending it. I'm saying we've identified.
And we can take paid out of it, but identify.
You guys have a copy of that? Probably not. The resolution 2020. Jeremy and Gary?
I do not.
Okay.
It'll say council agrees to approve the funding for new Gibson County Jail facility will be identified with a combination of cash reserve, correctional facility tax, and edit fund.
That does not mean we're spending anything out of them, and that does not mean we're guaranteeing spending anything out of them, correct?
That's right, identify.
What I asked if you could take out, Derek, is the word paid and replace it with the word identify.
Correct.
With all due respect, I don't think that satisfies what the judge is looking for in the settlement.
Well, I think the judge is looking for some type of commitment.
This isn't a commitment. I'm not.
But I think identified funding sources would be, they're saying they're identifying the three sources, not necessarily paying out of all three sources, but identifying the three sources. We may not have to take any cash reserves.
Yeah, because if we end up coming up with something and it's going to be covered by just the jail tax, then we won't have to hit the other two funds. That way, if we sign something saying that it's paid, this is my interpretation, that we're going to have to pay something out of both them too, even if we don't need to.
I agree with Craig on having that wording changed, and if that's not sufficient, they'll let us know, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So let me amend my motion then that the greenfield site with the amended wording in that resolution.
Have a motion, have a second.
Second. Moving.
Have a motion and a second. Any other questions, comments? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Sign both pages.
Let's sign here.
Yeah.
I'll retype that as well. They get the pages. Retype.
Oh, okay.
Send the board.
You don't? Oh, come on.
And while we're on the jail, Sherman Construction's here, the commissioners have been talking with them, and they've also spoke with some of us on council.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. I'm Mark Sherman. I'll be really brief. Thank you. We weren't on the agenda. I dropped off a packet of information to you folks about our company. We've been around 60 years. We've been construction managers on several jails, and they're all identified in that packet, reference letters and highlights. And when the time comes and the goals get set, we'd like to be considered to be on your team as construction manager. As a professional service contract. Anyway, just really brief, that's just a brief introduction. As time goes on, and those kind of decisions come up, we want to introduce ourselves and let you know we'd be available. Okay.
Just on mine, just for the commissioners that are not in here now, but I would prefer them to move forward with hiring somebody sooner than later. Who they hire is ultimately going to be their decision, but that way.
Yeah, I think council has, I think certain members of the council have met with different organizations and Sherman's, met with some council members as well as commissioners. I know Gilman has met with some of the council and commissioners. I think there's Paul Green is here today as well, and he's met with some commissioners and council as well. So it's just kind of, I'd like to hear your feedback. I'm kind of in the, I guess the moderator, or mediator, whatever you want to know, but as everybody's got different choices. And so I guess we need to come to a consensus. You know, if we need to, I don't know what we need to do, but you need to let me know, or if some of the commissioners know who you want to go with. And let's get it done. I had hoped to get somebody on board at least by the November commissioners meeting to get something going. So we got a couple weeks. But if you guys can let me know your feedback, if I don't hear from you, then I assume you don't have an opinion. And then I think it's unfair that you voice your opinion that you're against whoever comes out, but if you don't, let me know. Okay. So I think communication is the key. If you don't communicate, then I can't figure it out. So I can't tell the commissioners which way. If the council has a consensus, then the council needs to let me know to tell the commissioners who the consensus is.
My consensus would be that we get a company prior to design.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get in the next couple of weeks, Gary.
Yeah, I'd like to see
I would really like a decision from the council who you as a body want.
What for what?
Well, you've got construction managers, or you've got clerks and works. You know,
Okay.
are you looking for somebody to oversee on a daily basis, or you want a manager? So
I got it.
Yeah, I'd like to see us move forward on that also. That requires a meeting where we as a group sit down and say, okay, well, these are those press interest, and let's pick one, or you pick one, ours, or it needs to happen before our next council meeting for sure.
For sure. And you want the commissioners to make a decision, but if I don't hear from you, then.
Right.
And I was really shooting for November 4th. Make a decision on that, so. You need to have additional meetings with the firms and have the meetings, and I really would, as far as the commission, would like some type of consensus from the council.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. We have 30 transfers. Can we not do that as a group?
Yes, as a group. That's why I sent all of them to you in advance.
This is to cover the year-end payroll which will be the 27th pay for this year because it rolls around every so many years.
Well, payday falls
Can I
on
get a copy of that
January
signature,
1, 2021. And you guys agreed to pay it at the 27th of 2021.
27th pay this year or next year, one or the other. Right? So make 30 transfers. Need a motion to make all the transfers that were emailed out or handed out.
So moved.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Yay!
That was a whole lot easier than reading 30 of them in a row.
Yep.
Highway Department requests a transfer of $146.06 from Fund 1176-020118 overtime into 1176-020119 severance pay. Have a motion. Motion, second, and second. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Eric, did you say aye or?
Yes, aye.
Okay. I can sometimes hear both of them, sometimes I can't, sorry. County clerk requests a transfer of $8,500 from 1,001-0112 first deputy into 1,001-01 part-time. Motion.
To cover the end of the year and his, the person that does his payroll, because I have not talked to him, knows no part-time for next year. This is just to cover the end of the year.
Have a motion.
Have fund in the red.
$8,500.
Yeah.
You get a motion, I'll second.
No, I need a motion.
You need a motion. So that's, first deputy is no longer
She's no longer, and he has not replaced her.
since she left
June.
June of this year. And he knows that that won't be an option for,
I spoke with the person that does his payroll.
okay, just clarifying. I'll make that motion.
Have a motion. Now, second. And second, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Judge Craig requests replacement of probation officer. Anybody have a problem with that?
So this is not new, this is one that's left.
Yes.
Yes, it was one from the beginning of the year.
So it was a new position at the beginning of the year.
No, there's one that was hired.
Oh,
To replace somebody else at the end of the year. Now, no longer there either. So, does anybody have a problem with that?
No.
Okay. Judge Craig and Judge Mead request immediate replacement of the server slated, it's in the budget for 2021. Out of the budget. Amount of $27,384.49. Need to advertise for it. And I have spoke with one of the judges, there was one that I did talk to, and they're starting to, they're at the point that they could start losing data and everything else. The one they have is outdated and guess it had damage or something at one point this year. I don't know why it wasn't. Yeah.
In relation with that lightning strike,
Or was it the, could it have been the water damage?
This is the water damage.
Well, but this was approved. This quote was dated June 18th. So I don't think that's the water damage. Yeah,
I think it was outdated and they wanted it
Yeah.
replaced. Then I think.
and they were budgeting for next year, right?
And then I
Don't you think
it came
that?
after, and then it also got.
And we've had a lot of issues since then.
overall,
Yeah. I think,
I don't have a problem moving forward before, you know, what's going to fund it.
you want like,
How we going to fund it?
well, I mean, it's a rainy day or riverboat. Commissioners have extra money on their line.
Three options, it's just the option.
So it's just a motion to advertise.
whichever one you want to take it out of.
Here's just a question. Can it be purchased and they agreed to pay for it in 2021, it's in their budget for then, can that then be replaced if we fund it out of something?
60 days?
You know what I'm saying?
You want to step out in the hall and call Parrish?
Sure,
I mean-
it's parish, it can.
Are they out there?
No,
or
I'm-
actually
Call.
Or bill, that'll work too, where we can be billed January 1.
Yeah, go ahead and get it right in.
No, we're going to come with.
We would be billed more until
No.
January 1st.
Their invoice would be dated the first. and then we get paid. I don't know the length of time they're talking about, you know, getting it in here, getting it set up. I think it affects the auditor and treasurer. It's not just the courts.
Yeah, there were several departments that were
Yeah.
involved with it when we get to
So I don't know why it couldn't get it all started.
Court, auditor, clerk, oh, you know. She was just in here complaining about that.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah. They're not in our building, so. But she was planning on using CARES money, I think, to pay that.
Okay, thank you.
Time to bring a lunch in.
Yeah, really. Matt's gonna take you all out to dinner.
Appreciate getting somebody that you can ask whatever you want.
All right. Best elevator.
So let's do these others.
There's no appropriation amount of $1,733 from 1,027.01.11 request by veteran service for the year payroll.
Absolutely.
Have a motion, second, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Laptop purchase for council members for remote meeting through the CARES Act.
So Jimmy, I thought he had sent you guys an email. Jimmy McDonald had sent an email out about purchasing laptops for the council members, utilizing CARES money, because we don't know the future. We have some that are already remote. And if you want to move forward with that, I can get a quote from Parrish and bring it to the next meeting if that's something that you guys would be interested in. So it's up to you.
Are you there on the phone?
Good morning, this is Dan Parrish with Kyle Wallace. I understand that we found ourselves on the agenda after all.
Yeah, got a quick question here. On the server for the courthouse there, for 27,384.49. If we go ahead with that now, could we be, because it's in the budget for 2021, could we Could you hold the bill until January 1st of 2021 for that?
What is that estimate number again? If you could repeat that, please.
The estimate number, hang on. To 2020-471647, I believe.
07647.
Pull that up, so I'm looking at the same thing as you. I don't want to misspeak.
Okay, it's 07647.
647.
That makes sense. Okay. Okay, all right, so, yeah, wow. The short answer is maybe. Like everybody else on the planet, we're running kind of lean down too as a result of changes from COVID-19. We have an outstanding invoice, I believe. I'll have to double check this because I haven't seen what deposits came in the last couple of days. But we've had one outstanding from the last damage to the lightning damage to the courthouse that has us exposed as well. If we can, we've already paid our vendors for that one. If we can get reimbursed that one that's outstanding, and I can get with Sherry perhaps on this and then get clarification for your approval. We can get that, I can take the money from that, I can use that to cover this purchase, sit on the rest, and follow your request to invoice after the first of the year.
Okay. We're getting somebody else right now to see if that has been paid or
what,
or how, where that is at right now.
Yeah, let me look up that invoice real quick, and then I can answer that question as well, so we're not guessing. I said, we've had some difficulties receiving mail and whatnot since we started working on the printing building. So much stuff is so far behind.
We don't have any insurance yet, but
How much is that for?
9,000.
We don't have that insurance money yet.
No, we just got the last.
Yeah, that invoice has not been paid.
She said that the county has not received fund or the payment from the insurance as of yet.
Should be anytime.
And she said it should be anytime.
So I told that guy that was all those, I can say exactly what it is. I thought you knew about this.
Not yet. So what's the holdup on the check from the insurance company?
They're on the new one, checking, we didn't have everything turned in.
But who's the holdup?
Nobody now.
Okay.
So you sent everything into
Everything,
the,
yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
So did you hear that on just
Unfortunately, no.
just to tell you what happened on our end? The insurance just wanted to write one complete check, and now everything is turned in. At one point, apparently everything was not turned in because they were still working on different things. So it's all turned in now, so the insurance should be paying here soon.
Okay. All right, so what we can do, since we know that that's gonna happen soon, if you're okay with this, we'll await that payment. As soon as that payment comes in, we'll apply it and we will use those funds and pre-order everything and then sit on the invoice for this courthouse server upgrade project and then until January 1st.
Okay.
Yeah, you can pay them, have a check ready on January the 2nd, if it works. Yeah, yeah,
We can make that work on our end.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
okay.
Thank you. If you need anything else, please call me back, and I apologize. And I know this was gonna be an agenda item, I would have been there.
Oh, that's all right. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, so don't look like we need to do additional appropriation.
Okay.
Back to the laptops. Me personally,
I don't.
I don't.
I need it.
Yeah.
They can use that
What-
money for something more important than. Yeah.
Jeremy or Derek, would you guys like a laptop paid for by the CARES money, paid for with CARES money?
It really doesn't matter to me. I can make whatever work.
Okay.
I typically bring my own. I'm on my phone day. I don't, unless we feel like it's some kind of advantage. I mean, is it 100% covered?
As far as I know, it is.
I don't know.
I would pass.
Yeah, I'd pass.
I would too.
Yeah, I don't need one.
So that's gonna be
I know.
a no from us.
All right.
Oh. You're sitting there for a reason all this time.
Are these plans different or is it,
No, it's all the same.
it's all the same?
So, yeah, if everyone wants a hard copy. And I realize we're at the end of an agenda of an already long meeting, so I don't want to take more of your time than you guys want, but you'll remember that earlier this year, the redevelopment commission at this group's request engaged us to do a comprehensive financial plan for Gibson County for a couple of reasons. One, it's always good to take a fresh look at the county's finances, and see where you're at, where you're going. And two, as we've discussed in the past, the Toyota TIF area is going to be expiring following 2025. And there is a significant amount of assessed value that's captured currently that's going to be released into the tax base of the county and the overlapping taxing units. And that can have some impacts, unintended consequences of dumping that much assessed value into the tax base all in 1 year. So we talked about, with the redevelopment commission, taking a strategic approach to releasing assessed value each year to kind of build up to that expiration. This gives us the template of evaluating those pass-through decisions each year. So those are the purposes of this document. Now, there is this 44-page CFP. I'm not going to run through every page. I put together a PowerPoint tape of high points. I'm happy to answer any questions as we go. I'm happy to dive into the detail if you would like, or separately, if you want us to do, page by page, fund by fund, we walk through, be happy to set up a virtual meeting where we can do that. But like I said, for today's purpose, I thought it would be best to kind of get the high points. So first I wanted to highlight some key assumptions specifically related to COVID-19 and related to the TMMI TIF pass-through. On page 10 of the big document, you'll see a detailed list of assumptions, but just some quick COVID-related assumptions. In 2020, we're assuming a 5% shortfall in property tax collections to account for people who just didn't make or won't be making their full tax payments. You guys did pretty well in June in terms of your actual collections. We'll see what happens for the November billing, December distribution cycle, but we thought it was prudent to use a 5% shortfall just to account for possibility of people not paying their taxes. From a local income tax perspective, just a couple of weeks ago, the state released the 2021 income tax revenue estimates. I don't know if this group's had a chance to look at those, but Gibson County is actually up compared to 2020, which is always great to see an increase, but one thing to keep in mind is that your 2021 distributions are based on collections from July 1 of 2019 through August 31 of 2020. Typically, a typical non-COVID year, your income tax collections would be based on, or distribution for a year like 2020 was based on July 1 of 18 through August, or through June 30th of 19, the state's fiscal year. But the governor's executive order is delaying the deadline for income tax filings They also delayed the calculation period to give 2 more months of calculation period for local income tax distributions. Well, that means your 2022 distributions are going to be based on a 10-month period, September 1 of 2020 through June 30th of 2021. So we're still trying to work with the Department of Revenue to get a little more visibility into what drove the increase in income tax revenues for 2021. So we can figure out if there will be the negative impact we're anticipating in 2022 due to the shortened time period and still the ongoing effects of COVID. So for the purposes of this comprehensive financial plan, we're assuming that you'll see a 10% hit compared to 2020 in 2022 and a 5% hit in 2023, and then they'll recover to 2020 levels for 24, 25, and 26. This is a conservative approach. Obviously, we're just basing these on broad assumptions about the economy. But this does allow us, again, having this template set up as we get new information on an annual basis, you can plug it in and see kind of how things are actually operating. We've also assumed earnings on investments are 50% of their 2019 levels for 2020 and 2021 because of where interest rates are currently. And then what's not up there, but what's important to note as well, is we have used actual MVH and local road and street distribution information from the state and annualized that and held that flat into the future. That reflects the impacts of COVID-19 as well. People weren't driving as much in March, April, and May, and even June and July. So we have taken a more conservative estimate in those funds as well. From a net assessed value standpoint, we wanted to point out that we're assuming, for the purposes of this analysis, that the Redevelopment Commission maintains its annual pass-through of 40% of eligible incremental assessed value, that they don't stair-step it up. So you'll see an assumed growth in assessed value, and we work with an economics firm, Policy Analytics, to estimate assessed values moving forward. But you'll see a big jump of about just under $500,000 from 25 into 26, and that's due to the expiration of the Toyota TIF area and that assessed value being released to the overlapping tax. Now, we also want to talk about your estimated property taxes and circuit breaker tax credits. One of the things that we've talked about for years in Indiana ever since 08 when they came into place was the circuit breaker tax credit and the impact on the property tax revenues realized by local government units. So for the county in 2020, you were getting about $12.5 million in property tax revenues and losing about $700,000 to the circuit breaker. And we're assuming that the circuit breaker tax credits, as your revenues increase, and we're assuming increases based on the maximum levy growth factor, we're assuming that the circuit breaker will increase as well. But again, in 2026, as you release all that assessed value, as we talked about earlier with the solar project, that almost $500 million of assessed value will grow way faster than the growth factor that will be available to you for property taxes. So that's going to result in a decrease in tax rates and thus a decrease in your circuit breaker tax credit. We want to also recognize, and on the tax bills, they don't call it the circuit breaker tax credit, it's called property tax relief, that the county isn't the only entity that is losing property tax revenues to the circuit breaker tax credit. So we want to recognize the other units to see that as well. The county in total is losing about $3.7 million in property tax revenues to the tax caps. The county makes up about 18.7% of that. Cities and towns, a little under 40%. Schools, 34 and change. And then the balance is made up by the libraries, the special taxing districts, and the townships. And this is telling the story of the assessed values, and we already talked about the assumptions. But we're also kind of matching that up with the certified tax rates for the county unit itself. And just looking at a little bit of the history, you've seen the assessed value hold constant in regards that between 17 and 18, that increase is largely attributable to the redevelopment commission acting to increase the pass-through percentage from the Toyota tip area. It had previously been in like the 12 to 15% range, and they increased it to 40%. And then it's held, your assessed values have held relatively level for 18, 19, and 20. And you'll see that your tax rates have been ticking up just slightly over the years. And a lot of that is attributable to your growth in the maximum levy. Your cash balances as well, we wanted to look at a little bit of history and then an estimated trend moving forward. And the selected funds, you see we have the subheader selected funds. They're outlined in this report in a couple different spots. But just to, for the benefit of everyone here, the funds that we looked at were the general fund, the lit economic development fund, also known as the edit fund, the cumulative building, cumulative bridge, the health fund, the local road and street fund, motor vehicle highway restricted, motor vehicle highway, rainy day, statewide 911, and reassessment. And on page 9 of the larger report, we've included a description of the eligible uses for all of those funds, just helpful reference. And those funds represent your primary operating funds and the funds that you receive property tax with. Oops, I was hitting buttons. So your history was trended up. We're estimating a decrease in fund balances for the end of 2020, and this is based on conferring with Sherry extensively on kind of budget to actual performance, where the trends are heading, and then we also talk a lot with Jeremy and to get the council's perspective on how 2020 is going to play out. And then we used your budget information and then also assumptions that are outlined in the analysis to estimate where your fund balances are going to head over the next 5 years following 2020, or actually 6 years. And you'll see that we are estimating that despite a tick down in 2020, that you will see steady growth in your fund balances through 2026. Now, it's important to recognize that this is a plan. It's based on a set of assumptions. And as soon as I printed this out, the assumptions are going to change because, the real world happens. But again, like I said, you have a template in place now so that if something significant happens and you need to evaluate what that impact is on the county's finances, you have a roadmap for that. You can do it yourselves, just kind of looking at this and using this as a guidepost. And if it's something that requires a more comprehensive analysis, we have the template set up where we can make those changes on a fairly rapid basis. And certainly if we provide annual updates to this report moving forward, the cost will be significantly reduced because we have this baseline established. Now, I wanted to, for the benefit of this presentation, just call out your primary operating funds, being the general fund and the edit fund. And you'll see that, again, we're estimating your fund balance decreasing from year-end 19 to year-end 2020, but then slowly building back up over time based on the assumptions that we have in this analysis. One thing we wanted to include for people's reference is this 15% operating balance line. The Government Financial Officers Association, GFOA, they recommend the best practice is maintaining a fund balance that is 15% of your operating expenditures. And so that's what this gray line represents, is that 15% line. So your fund balances as they stand now and as they're projected over the next 6 years are estimated to well exceed that 15% best practice fund balance. I would say that a lot of times when we're doing comprehensive financial plans, we aren't showing such positive trend lines, and that fund balance is above the GFOA best practices. And you'll notice as you read through this that not every fund maintains that, but you have strong fund balances, and those are estimated to continue as you look at your historical practices and what's estimated for the future. And then the same can be said for your edit fund. Based on the information that we have, we're actually estimating an increase in edit balance at the end of 2020 and consistent increases from there on out. we made certain assumptions on expenditures that did drive those fund balances increasing. And we had a lot of back and forth with Sherry and with Jim and with Jeremy to get some more background. But on that page 10, just for some of the detail on those expenditure assumptions, we assume the operating disbursements for 2020 are based on the 2020 budget as certified by the DLGF. The estimated personal services expenditures for 21 are based on the 2020 proposed budget and increased by 3%, allowing for a 1% raise for county employees, in addition to an assumed 2% inflation factor. Typically, for these analyses, we assume a 2% annual inflation factor for disbursements. The 1% increase for personal services was based on feedback we received from Jeremy and Sherry. The estimated non-personal services expenditures for 21 through 26 are based on your proposed budget, inflated by 2% annually. We assume capital outlays for 21 through 26 are based on the 2020 proposed budget and flatline. And your estimated expenditures for the budgets not certified by the DLGF are based on feedback we received from some working conversations with Jeremy and Sherry. I do want to point out one thing that I find interesting with this, as in every community I've done this in, on pages 42 and 43, we've included tables that illustrate the budget to actual for these selected funds, well, for your funds that you budget in. And you'll see that in 2018, overall, you spent 101% of what was budgeted. In 2019, you spent 100% of what was budgeted. But in 2019, really, that's somewhat misleading because that's really driven by spending 116% of your budget for the MGH funds. And that was, it's our understanding, an intentional spend down of cash reserves. If you look at your other operating funds that you budget for, you actually spent well under your budget, say for the Keene Bridge Fund. So that's something, if you're depending purely on your budget and thinking that's what you're going to spend every year, that's one thing. But I think we've shown here that Gibson County, especially in its general fund, has done a good job of, you budget at one level, but you actually spend at another level. And that's something to keep in mind. And I'm sure you had that conversation when you were going through the budget process this year. One final thing I want to call out in this analysis, and this is something that we include in every comprehensive financial plan, and it's at the tail end of the executive summary on page 8. We include a few specific actions that the county can take to address budget deficits, which you really don't have going on too much, and to prevent a decline in cash balances. We're not saying that Gibson County, as it stands today, needs to go out and raise its income tax rates, even though we include that here, or establish its cumulative capital development fund, which we call out here. These are simply recommendations of actions that could be taken if you feel that you need additional revenues to operate from or to do capital projects from moving forward. So I wanted to be clear with that. We're not coming in here saying you got to do all of these things to increase revenues. Just want you to know that those options are on the table if you determine as policymakers that that is necessary. And I know that that was a lot in a short amount of time. So I'm happy to answer any questions, or like I said, you've got my email address, my phone number. Feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to answer any questions that you
I have one question to the council. How we end up in our budgeting, you're stating that all part-time, if you have part-time this year, that shut off as of January the 1st, or you cannot hire any additional part-time. If there's part-time people working right now, they can continue to keep that job.
No.
No, so all part-time is eliminated as of January 1.
Except, there's some exceptions, like emergency services and.
Yeah, I understand that, but purely across the board.
So is Jared still on there?
You're still on, yes?
Okay,
Does he
okay.
know to stick around?
Yes, I need him. Oh, well, he needs to stay. Okay,
You done?
no,
No.
okay,
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
thank you.
There's mine marked invoice.
Thanks.
The work to design services and stuff to do. Building over here, on North Main Street. Probably probation department, center over there.
Okay.
We don't, commission don't even money pay this. So why don't you take it out of the building fund? What they thought this was gonna be done out of. I think 45% of it will come back from the public defender. We'll make our share 8,000 or 6. I guess it will, isn't that the way it is?
No.
We have to, don't we have to pay it, and then she gets reimbursed for it? She should get reimbursed for it. I don't know if we do. I mean, we can try, but I don't know if she will, for sure.
Or on what?
On the study for the building over there, I don't know that she'll get reimbursed. Or not.
I mean, they reimburse you for everything else.
Yeah, but that was prior to that even being approved, that budget.
How much is it, Kay?
I don't know, $15,750.
So,
It's all broken down on the different pages. I guess, because he's got over here what's been done, because something's not been done yet. The total amount due is. The total amount due is through phase 1 and 2. And anything on phase 3, 4, and 5. So yeah, but this is just the 7,000. It's already broken down, actually, 55% of the probation office, and 45% because it's already broken down under college. I see that now. If you have to go into that building, I don't know what the state would do. If you're studying it, go ahead and do that building over there. But I understand the judges pulled that, because it's gonna cost a lot more than they thought.
I don't know.
They just asked me, they called me the other day, they were having meetings, and wanted to know what was available in the Cume building. That's the last I heard them, so they never word to me, I believe.
They were supposed to be on the, well, they were on the agenda this morning, but then I think they both want to present at the same time. So that's why there was nobody here this morning to talk about that plan. Well, I guess,
Well, I was told it was gonna cost revenue to do what they were gonna do, so they.
oh, I'm sure,
I don't.
I'm sure, but I don't know about that.
I didn't see the price, I just heard what it was.
So the 15,750 is what's already been billed?
Yeah, you gotta copy the invoice or something. It's already done phase 1 and phase 2. On the building, it's supposed to be done.
It'd be part of the month agenda. I mean, I don't understand, I understand it's a bill and services that are being asked for and all that. It should be part of the November agenda, in my opinion.
So is that what you,
Yeah, I would recommend it to be put on the November agenda and somebody explain where we're at, where we've been, where we're going. And then make it on the agenda, the request is to use Cume building funds to pay for this, which I don't know if you can use those for for studies, or if it actually has to be repairs, I don't know. So that'd be something to find out. If that's their desire, can building funds be used to pay that? And have that part of the November agenda to explain who these folks were, what they did, and where they're going with it.
Breeze wants it all work, basically.
Okay.
I mean,
All right. Thank you, Greg. I got long enough.
I think that's it.
So, we presentation, no? In that,
Okay.
Oh, in the plan. And I would also like to take
We're
this
adjourned.
moment to thank